Hilchish Gogis Perik Sheni. Ein Adam Chayev Chatas al Shegagos, Ad Sheyeh Shegig Mitchila V'Atseif. Aval Shogeg Betchila V'Hezed B'Seif. In the beginning he didn't realize that Shabbos, or he didn't realize this Malach is Osir. And at the end he did realize, a Hezed Betchila, at the beginning he realized that it's Shabbos or it's a Malacha. And V'Shogeg B'Seif at the end he didn't realize. So he's Potter Mikorban Chatas. Ketzad, Kegen Shehetzi Chefes Mishus L'Shus B'Shabbos. And Akar B'Zodin, he knew it was Shabbos, he knew it was a Malacha. And he did the Akira B'Zodin, and Lepel is the Hiniach B'Shgaga. The Hanochi he did B'Sheni. He forgot already that it was Shabbos. While he was doing the Hanochi, he forgot it's a Malacha. Esha Akar B'Shgaga and Lepel V'Hiniach B'Zodin. So either way is Potter. Achiyager B'Shgaga and also the Hiniach B'Shgaga V'Chen Kol Kiyetz B'Zah. Now there's a deal Kaloshin that the Ram starts off, Ein Adam Chayev Chatas, Achiyeh Shegig Mitchila V'Atseif. So it sounds like it has to be Mitchila V'Atseif, and in the middle there can be Amazing. Then the Ram fears Zuisam, Meshagir B'Tchila V'Hezel B'Seif. Because what would be the din if he was a Shagir B'Tchila and he was a Shagir B'Seif and he was a Hezed B'Emtz? In the middle he realized that it's a Malach or that it's Shabbos. Would he be included in the Chi of Chatas? So if you did Medai from the Reisha, Achiyah Shegig Mitchila V'Atseif. So it has to be Mitchila V'Atseif. And in the middle, if he remembered, he wouldn't be Chayev. From the Seif, Avol Meshagir B'Tchila V'Hezel B'Seif, it sounds like only it was either B'Tchila or B'Seif wasn't a Shegig, but if in the middle, there would be a Shegig. Now the Maisa is, the din is, the Ramar agreed, the din is that if you're Maver Mitchila, let's say from Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, and there was a Yediyah Be'emtza, so that Yediyah Be'emtza patters you from a Shegig. Mashenkin, if you were Zayrik, Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, so then that Yediyah Be'emtza, so if there was a Yediyah B'Tchila, Yediyah B'Seif, so then it also is patter. And there's a person Zayrik, Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, and while it's landing in the Rosh Hashanah, he realizes already it's Shabbos. So that din is also that he's potter michatas. That's we'll learn. That's considered that it wasn't a shegig basef. But if in the middle he threw something and he started, he knew that he forgot that it was Shabbos and he forgot that it's a malacha. And when it finished, he also forgot. And in the middle, during the zrika, he reminded himself. So that reminding himself in the middle of the zrika wouldn't be mevatel the chi of chatas. There would be a chi of chatas. By havara, it would be mevatel, but by zrika, it's not mevatel. So the Ram Baruch wants to tell you that that's the two l'shenis. There's ein adam chayev chatas hashegagos yatshia sheg mitchil v'atseif, and then he's for sure chayev chatas, regardless havara or zrika. Aval shogeg b'tchila v'hezed b'seif, so he's for sure not chayev. And then there are cases in between. That's how he wants to learn pshat if I am for this deal. Halacha beis. Over avera v'yidei shehi b'leisasa. Aval any yidei shechayav nolei koros. His shegig is not his shegig. He doesn't know it's a iser. He just doesn't know it's a koros. So the din is harezu shgaga. This is still called a shegig, and therefore maybe chatas, because since he didn't know the severity of the iser, he didn't know that it's a chi of koros. So that's called a shegig. Avalim yadashi b'koros. But v'shagag b'karbon v'liyadim chayav nolei karbon lav. His shegig was he knew that it was a lav. He knew there was a chi of koros, but he didn't realize that for a chi of koros that you do b'shegig, you have to bring a carbon. So that's hareza mezit. Sheshigagas carbon ein shkogas ba'avedas elu shechayav nolen koros. So there's certain shkogas, l'masubashigas bitui, certain shkogas by carbon elevated. Over there we say that taka, the whole shkoga is only that he didn't know that there's a chi of carbon for a shegig. Because if he has more of a shegig, so then it's felt no adam b'shvos is melchatchila not chayav. So the whole hechatimtza of a shkoga over there, those averas, is that he was shagag, that he didn't realize that there's a chi of carbon. Masha'inkin benegeh, these averes sheyesh bikaris, these averes which sheyesh bikaris, so over there, so the gather of shagig is only if he doesn't realize that there's a chi of karis. Masha'inkin, if he realizes there's a chi of karis, so shigagas carbon is leishmosh gaga. That's what he's saying. Shigagas carbon ain't gaga, but averes elu shechayav nolein karis. Even though sometimes shigagas carbon is called a shgaga, but legabi these averes which chayav naleim koros. So if you're aware that you're chayav koros, so the fact that you're not aware that you're chayav a carbon is not considered a shgaga. Halacha gimel. Mi shelimnei dolei atzmi shel chet shechata. Afal pi sheyada bevadei she'over aleisa sheyesh b'm koros is a reza poter mikar mechatas. So there's another din. In order to be chayav achatas, you have to be aware the avera that you did. You had to be aware at one point in time. It was neidolei chatasi hashachata. But if there was, you were never aware which avera you did, even though you know you did an avera, so you're potter from chatas. Shenemar asher chataba. And nedele chatose asher chotaba. So we have to know, he has to know the chet shechotaba. Ad sheyeda chet shechotaba. Ketzad? Chelev v'nesel lefonav. And v'ochel is achas mem. Aber ve'eni yedua eze ochel. He doesn't know. He knows for sure he ate one of them. So it's a chayv krisus. But he doesn't know which one. Ishte nida v'achesi bebayis. V'shoga gobo al achas mem. Ve'eni yedua eze mem bol. Or Shabbos v'im ha-kippurim lefonav. V'asim malacha b'achem. He knows for sure he did malacha b'achem. Maybe even if he did, maybe ben hashmoshes with the two. V'asim malacha b'achem. Ve'eni yedua be'eze mem masa. So the din is a potter in the kov mechatos. So there's a din. You have to be aware of which avera you did. That's only if you never were aware. However, halacha dalet chota v'nedele chatase, and then v'chazav v'shokher. So at that point in time, when it was nedele chatase, he became mechuyev in a chatas. But right now, when he wants to bring the chatas, he doesn't know what the chat is. So over here, that's not a problem. Arei maybe chatas l'shem mashahu v'tiyachol kishar chatas and acholos. So this din of yediyah is not a din of bringing the chatas. It's a din of the chales chi of chatas. The chales chi of chatas comes through the idea of a nedele chatos asher chota, and he has to know what he did the avera. At that point in time, it became a chales chiyuv. Once there's a chiyuv, so even though he's bringing the chatos, he doesn't know what he's bringing for. So he says, "I know I'm chiyuv chatos. I don't know which avera I did, but lepel, I became chiyuv chatos because there was a time that I knew which avera I did." Halacha hey, shogag b'shem echad, v'heim shnei gufim is chayv. Because even though he doesn't know which one he did, but he knows whichever one he did, it's the same avera. Ketzad. Shtei nidis. There were two nidis. And v'shogeg ba'achas mem. Aber ve'en yedu ezehi. Shtei achis. V'shogeg ba'achas mem. Ve'en yedu ezehi. So he knows. In the case before, he didn't know if it was achesi or a nida. Masha'inkin over here, he knows it was either achesi or a nida. He knows which avera he did. But he doesn't know which achis. He doesn't know which nida. So the din is chayiv chatas. Why? Shariyoh da atzmi shel chet. Since he knows the atzmi shel chet, he doesn't have to know the act, the object which he did the avera with. All he has to know is which avera he did. Lamaza dema, l'shtei neiris deilkis. If there would be two candles that were lit, and shekiba achasmem, he knows that he extinguished one of them. Ve'yedu ezen neri, he doesn't know which one he extinguished. L'shnei tamchin shel chelev. There's two pots of chelev. She'achol me'achad mem, ve'yedu me'ezen tamchin ma'achol. So over there also shul chay v'chein kol ki etz b'zeh. The question is, why is the mashal more pashut than the nimshal? So the mice is in the nimshal, this is in the case of the shtei achios, the shtei nidis, over there be'am is the guf and mechulakim. So the pale, if a person will learn be'amshach, that if a person is bo'al shneim, if a person would be a bo'al shneim, so he's be'am is chayiv shtei chatois, because since they're guf and mechulakim, so therefore, even though it's the same avera and it was be'helam echad, but since they're guf and mechulakim, he's chayiv on both of them. So over here there would be a svara. So since the be'am is the guf and mechulakim, so there would be a svara that if he doesn't know which one he did, so in Mele he shouldn't be chayiv achatas al derech if he doesn't know which avera he did. By the shnei tamchin over there they don't have a din of guf and mechulakim. So if he eats from the shnei tamchin behelam echad, or he's mechaber the shtei neiris behelam echad, he's only chayiv one. So over there it's for sure one because there's no svara that it should be two. So in Mele that's what the Ram is saying, that even though over here it's guf and mechulakim, so there's a svara that it should be two, but he's saying no, it's areza deimet l'shnei tamchin or l'shnei neiris, where over there, since there's no guf and mechulakim, the nekudas advarim is that the guf and mechulakim is not a factor here. The factor is the avera. Since he knows which avera he did, even though he doesn't know which guf he did it in, and for each guf there's really a separate chiyav chatas, but nevertheless he's chayiv al derech when there wouldn't be a din of guf and mechulakim. Halacha vav. Kol ha-mechuyev chatas kvu al shegagos. Any avera which there's a chiyav chatas kvu al shegagos, which was talking about the 42 averas of chayv krisus. And v'asa b'shgoga, he did this avera b'shgoga. V'neido le'achar shechata. After shechata, he realizes that he did this avera b'shgoga. Is afal pi shelihoisa le'yediyah b'tchila shezeh chatu. Normally we think of shegig means he forgot that it's an avera, or he forgot something. Over here, Bechlal wasn't aware that it was a chet. He wasn't Bechlal ever aware that it was a chet. He did something b'shgoga, but he wasn't ever aware that it was a chet. Nevertheless, areza chayiv chatos. The fact that he wasn't ever aware that it was a chet is not a factor. Lepel, since he did the avera, and Lepel now he knows that he did the avera. Because the idea b'sof that he knows that now that he did the avera b'shgoga, so he's chayiv chatos. Ketzad tinik shenishba lebein akum v'gadol v'hu eina yedeh mahim yisrael v'leidosim. He doesn't know anything about Yiddishkeit. He doesn't know he's a Yid. He doesn't know Bechal is a musik of Yid. And then v'asem malacha b'Shabbos v'achal chayla v'damu kiyetzibam. Is k'sheyavadale shu Yisrael u'mitzuv al kolelu. So the din is chayiv lahavi chatas al kol avera v'avera v'chein kol kiyetz b'zeh. So for each avera, they're all behelam echad. So for each avera, each separate avera, he has to bring a separate chatas, even though there was no yediyah at all betchilah. But that's also called a shegig. Halacha zayin. Hashegig b'lei kavana b'arayis eb macholas asuris chayiv chatas. But b'Shabbos is potter mechatas. Now, a shegig normally means he's doing something, he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't know that it's usher. He doesn't know it's usher. Let's say by Shabbos, he doesn't know today is Shabbos. He doesn't know this ma'aseh is a ma'aseh usher. Now that is every other shegig. He knows what he's doing. He's just not aware that he's doing an isser. Over here we have a chiddush that he's a shegig and belei kavana. He's not only a shegig. He doesn't know it's an isser. He doesn't really have intention on doing what he did. He was belei kavana. So if it's ba'arayis eb macholas asuris, it's chayiv achatas. However, b'Shabbos, if it's talking about a avera that he was a shegig b'lei kavana legabi Shabbos, so then he's potter mechatos. Ketzad hoyim misasik em isha u'ba'ola b'lei kavana lebeila v'arei ervalo. So he had no intention for the beila. He was a misasik b'isha. Obviously, he was doing something, but he wasn't intending for beila. And lepeil he was ba'ola b'lei kavana is arei ervalo. So he's chayiv achatas. Dima shezeh shebepiv reiku. He has something in his mouth. He's under the impression that it's saliva. Ubole, b'lei kavana l'shem achila be'elim. He had no intention of eating. He thought he was swallowing saliva. And lepeil b'areu chelev. It ended up being chelev. So the din is ariza chayiv chatas. So in these two cases, he's doing an act. He has no intention of doing this act b'chlal. And lepeil, he ended up doing this act. So the din is that's called a shegig and he's chayiv chatas. Sai by arayis and sai b'macholas asuris. Now that's when you get macholas asuris and arayis. However, nischavim lagbias atolush v'chotech zamechuber b'lei kavona lechatichasi. He just had an intention of picking up something up which he thought was detached from the ground. And lepel, he ended up cutting it, detaching it from the ground. So over here he's potter because meleches machshavas asur teira k'mei shebi'arnu b'mkemi. And since this is not meleches machshavas, so therefore he's potter. Now it's shver because l'chura there's two dinim over here. There's a din. Normally, a shegig has to have kavana. A misasig is potter. Misasig is potter is a p'tur b'chol ha'teira kula. Bo v'leib misasig, the Gemara says. So there's a p'tur of misasig. And then there's another din, but a misasig b'chalav b'aray is chayiv shekei nana. Now if you're nana, so that over there's no p'tur of misasig. So l'chura, that's the beginning of this din. Hashegig b'lei kavana. When he gei arayis or macholas asuris, he's chayiv because he's nana. So l'chura, the Ram Shafiru is anything that you're not nana, so l'chura, there's a din that you're potter. Whereas the special din of misasik is chayiv by macholas asuris and arayis is because you're nana. The Ram is saying it's only macholas asuris and arayis. So l'chura, the Ram Shafiru is that anything that you're not nana, even not Shabbos, l'chura, you're potter because it's a p'tur misasik. That's question number one. The pale the Rambam fears is that Shabbos you're potter because it's melechas machshavas. L'chura you're potter because it's misasik. L'chura you're potter because it's misasik, not mitzad melechas machshavas. There's also another shaila. The Rambam himself paskins in Hilchos Shabbos that if you were nischavan lachtech es atolish, v'chotech es hamechuber, you also potter. That's also a p'tur. It's a p'tur of misasik. And lepel over here, the Rambam is saying the nischavan lagbias atolish, v'chotech es hamechuber. You're potter. You even potter in a greater eifin. By nischavan lachtech es atolish, v'chotech es hamechuber. So why does the Rambam only say nischavan lagbias atolish, v'chotech es hamechuber? That's kasha that are asked on the Rambam. The closest answer is that in there's two dinim. There's a din of misasik, which is a p'tur, and then there's a din of melechas machshavas, which is a p'tur. The Shegagos says in the tshuva that there's a difference. Misasik is only a p'tur in chatos. It's only a p'tur in chatos. In other words, you're potter from a chatos, you did an avera, but the pill, you're potter from a chi of chatos. It's a special din. Masha'enkin, melechas machshavas is not a din in chatos, melechas machshavas is a din in Shabbos. Memela, if it was no melechas machshavas, so Memela, Bechlal wasn't a ma'aseh iser. So Memela, it comes out that there could be a chatimtzal moshe by Shabbos, that if you were nischaven, lachtech es atolish, v'chotech es hamechuber, so you attack a p'tur mitzad, potter mitzad mesasik, because lepel, you didn't know you're doing an iser, but on the other hand, you don't have a p'tur of melechas machshavas, because lepel, you were nischaven lachtech. So when is there a p'tur? That's why the Rambam says over here, nischaven lagbias atolish, because the Rambam is speaking about the p'tur of melechas machshavas. So b'kitzer, so b'negeya chalav marayis yichayv because shekeinan. That's posh. B'negeya Shabbos, if you were just not nana, but on the other hand, it was nischaven lachter sam mechuber, v'choter sam lachter zatolish v'choter sam mechuber. You would take to be potter from the korban chatos, but on the other end, you would be doing a ma'aser avera. And therefore, the Rambam says this tzir of nischaven lakbias zatolish v'choter sam mechuber, which is a ptur even in the ma'aser avera. That's how the Rambam brings us from. But on the other hand, it's still shver. The glatik, it's not so glatik because the Rambam is speaking about hilchas bringing korbanos. The Rambam is saying there's a chiyuv to bring a korban. B'negei shegi b'li kavana b'rais macholas asuris a chayiv and a korban. Mashenk b'Shabbos you put it from a korban. L'chura mitzad the din p'turim korban you don't have to come on to the din of melechus machshavos, and that's the pashtus haloshin of the Rambam. So the halach is clear that by chalavas arais you chayiv even though you didn't have any kavana, you did the shegi b'li kavana. The Rambam doesn't write over here that the chiyuv is mitzad nana. The Rambam doesn't write those words over here. The chiyuv is mitzad nana, and then the Rambam says by Shabbos you're potter, and the Rambam also doesn't say you're potter because you're misasik. The Rambam says because melechus machshavos asur teira, and the Rambam doesn't mention b'negei. What about misasik b'negei other averos? Doesn't mention that over here. Halacha ches kol oisa mitzvah min mitzvahs ubechlal asiyasa nasis avera shechayoven oleh koros b'shgaga. He was a shegig about an avera shechayoven oleh koros while he was doing a mitzvah. So the din is areza potter michatos mipnei she'asa b'reshus. So even though normally every shegig pshat he was doing something, he didn't know it was aser, and nevertheless he's chayiv achatos. But over here, since he had a reason to do it, normally you say you should have checked before you did it. You should have checked. Mashenkin over here, since he did it b'reshus, he was doing a mitzvah. So Mela, since he was doing a mitzvah, he was a tov b'dvar mitzvah, and lepel he was also mitzvah. So therefore, even though he was a shegig and he did a chayiv krisus, but nevertheless he's part of machatos. But Mneisha asa b'reshus kesa habal yevimte varehi nida v'hule yadi, he was a shegig. So the din is areza potter michatos shaharei asa b'reshus. Avol and boal ishtei varei nida is chayiv chatos. Why? Mepnei sheli shali, he was a shegig. He should have asked her, and therefore he is chayiv chatos. Mepnei sheli shali v'achar kachivil. He knows even though he was being bail ishtei, which he's allowed to, and not only he's allowed to, but it's actually a mitzvah, it's a chiyav eina. But nevertheless, he should have asked her v'achar kachivil. I lechur, if you're saying he should have asked her, so by Yivam also he should have asked her. So the answer is no. So the rule is azay. When a person is doing a mitzvah, and lepel, why he's doing a mitzvah, he was a shegig about an isur kares. So if it was vaisus and shegig, there's different madregas in shegig. There's a shegig side by the baal yevimte, if she was a nida, he was a shegig, and side by the baal ishte, if she was a nida, he was a shegig. But the shegig of the baal yevimte is a shegig which is not such a there's not such a strong taina because he's ain't a rogelbo. Masha'inkin by a baal ishte over there, since he's rogelbo, so over there there's a stronger taina that he should have yishal. That's l'chura the pshat. So as I say, when a person's tov b'dvar mitzvah and he's asa mitzvah and lepel he did an avera which is a shegig, which normally for such a madrega of shegig there would be a chiyav chatas. But now, since he was involved in doing a mitzvah and he was asa mitzvah, so that madrega of chiyav chatas goes off. Masha'inkin when a person is involved in doing a mitzvah, which is Baal Ishtei. And Lepel, he did an Avera, which he has Kodesh, which is normally Chayiv Achiyav Chatas. And over there, there's a stronger taina to him. That Hoyolei Lishel, so even though this Hoyolei Lishel doesn't make him amazing, he's still a Shegig. But this Madrega of Shegig, of Hoyolei Lishel, is a Madrega of Shegig, which because of that, the Hatter, or the Ptur of Torah B'dvar Mitzvah goes off. So notice, there's a Ptur of Torah B'dvar Mitzvah B'negei Shegig, but only on a madrega of shegig al derech of a baal yevimte, and b'shegig she was a nida. Masha'inkin this madrega of shegig by a ishtei where hoyuli lishels is like a stronger taina. It's like more karev l'mezid. It's not mezid, but it's more of a taina on this shegig. So for such a madrega of shegig, the Torah b'dvar mitzvah doesn't take over. That's the chorah of pshat. V'chein misha hoyuli shnei tinekes echad lomel b'Shabbos v'echad lomel b'erev Shabbos. He has two children, and one of them is supposed to be mal on Shabbos, and the other one is to be mal either on Friday or on Sunday. And lepel v'shachach umol shneim b'Shabbos. So the one that he was mal that was supposed to be on Friday or on Sunday was an isur kares. He was being over on the isur of Shabbos, and it wasn't deicha Shabbos, it wasn't a milah b'zmana. So the din is potin michatas. Why? Shari yesh l'shus lomul echad m'Shabbos. And v'Shabbos is dog tchui. It's like mitzvah also knows he Lepel, he's supposed to mechuyev to go ahead and be mal one of them on Shabbos. So Shabbos is tchuya etzlei, and he did a mitzvah. So therefore, even though Lepel afal pishen shnei gufim, Lepel we're talking about two separate children. The mitzvah was this child, not the other child. Abrahel is mani bol, any medactic, and therefore that's also considered a Torah b'dvar mitzvah. He has two children to be mal, and Lepel he was mal both of them. One of them which was supposed to be mal on Shabbos, the other one which he wasn't supposed to be mal on Shabbos, either should have been on Friday or on Sunday. So either way, he's potter mitzad Torah b'dvar mitzvah v'asa mitzvah. So even though the mitzvah was done in one guf, and the Torah b'dvar mitzvah and he did the kares was in another guf, but nevertheless is mani bol. That's talking about only if one of them was roy lomel b'Shabbos. Roy lomel b'Shabbos, and v'shachach umol b'Shabbos mi she'enu roy lomel b'Shabbos. So chayiv chatzos, the person has a child that was born either on Friday or on Sunday. So Memele he can't be mal on Shabbos, and he goes ahead and he's mal on Shabbos. So Memele that's not considered zmani bol because there's really no mitzvah to do right now, and therefore if he does it on Shabbos, he's chayiv chatzos. Now what happens if he has two children? And one child is to be mal on Shabbos, and the other child is to be mal on Sunday. And Lepel, he was mal, instead of being mal the one of Shabbos, he was mal the one of Sunday. Lepel, he didn't do both children. The case before, he had two children, and he did them both. But and then there was another case where he had two children, and he only had, and was supposed to be, he had a child that he was supposed to be mal on Sunday, and Lepel, he was mal on Shabbos. Now what happens if he has two children? One child to be mal on Shabbos, and one Shabbos to be mal on Sunday, and by accident he made a mistake and he was mal the Sunday of Shabbos. So over there he was a bold for a dvar mitzvah, but on the other end he was leos a mitzvah. So on that the Mishnah brings that the Ram paskins that Torah b'dvar mitzvah v'leos a mitzvah. So even though he was a Torah b'dvar mitzvah, the musik of Torah b'dvar mitzvah is the same musik. But Lepel, since he was leos a mitzvah because he was only mal of the one of Friday on Shabbos or the one on Sunday on Shabbos, so therefore it's not considered a. So therefore he's chayiv achatas. Halacha tes umon shebol lomo lufnei sayim b'yem haShabbos. It's already afternoon, late afternoon on Shabbos. V'amru leilei nisher pnai b'yem kadei shetomel. You're not going to really make it to be able to be mal the child on Shabbos. You may start the milah, so maybe you'll be doing a chavola, but you won't finish the milah to take over the whole arla, so you won't be mekayim the mitzvah, so it won't justify the beginning of the chavola. So it's going to come out that you're a chevel b'Shabbos v'liyasa mitzvah. And v'amar, and he said, no, ragal ani v'zoriz u'b'mheira amul. So the din is imle hishlim el ad yitzias Shabbos. If Lepel taka, what they were warning him about taka happened, is areza chayiv chatos sharei hisrubei. Since they were hisrubei, he should have realized that it's possible. In other words, he was going ahead to be mal the child, so he was involved in doing a mitzvah. So if there was lei hisrubei, so then he doesn't get a chatos. But that's the mashmois advar. Masha'inkin, if they were hisrubei, so since they were hisrubei, he shouldn't have started. And if he started and he didn't end up being mal on Shabbos, he just made a chavola on Shabbos, so he's taka chayiv chatos. Now lechura over here is the shaila we just learned. That in order to be a toyah b'dvar mitzvah and be potter is only if you're a toyah b'dvar mitzvah v'asa mitzvah. Over here, he went ahead and he was mal the child on Shabbos, but Lepel, he didn't really finish the milah, so he didn't do the mitzvah, and he only did the Isukaris. So l'churi, he was a toyah b'dvar mitzvah v'le'asa mitzvah. So why, if lei hisrubei, the question is why by lei hisrubei wouldn't he be chayiv achatas? The Rambam is only saying by hisrubei is chayiv achatas. So in that the Kes Mishnah says, which you have to understand, that since in a case where he thought he could do it, and there was lei hisrubei, so it's not a ptur of Torah b'dvar mitzvah, he goes into a ptur of an onus. So there's two madregas, the madrega of a Torah b'dvar mitzvah, and on that is only if it's a Torah b'dvar mitzvah or asa mitzvah, and then there's a gather of an onus. He's doing it, he thought he's able to do it, and there was no reason for him to think that he's not able to do it, and Lepel, he wasn't able to do it. So that's called an onus, and therefore he's potter. Masha'inkin, if hisrubei, so that takes off the onus, and then he's chayiv. Halacha yud. Hamoitzi is halulav b'yom tev harishon shel chag shechol yez b'Shabbos. K'dei lotzos bei. And Lepel v'havire arba ames b'shus harabim b'shegig. Lepel, he went ahead. So knows he's taking out this lulav to go to bli mitzvah. Lepel, he's not being yotzeh by taking it out. It's not like he's doing the mitzvah and the aver is coming pasachas. He's doing a ma'isa of hitzah or havoras dal ramas. There's an issue. Why is the Ram talking about? More also they speak about Shemei Yavirenu dal ramas b'shus harabim. But Al Kolpon, he did a ma'isa of havoras dal ramas b'shus harabim, And the purpose was in order to go ahead and do the mitzvahs. Even though he didn't do the mitzvah b'shas ma'isa, but he was involved in doing the mitzvah. And then he went ahead and was yetzer. So the din is potter. Sharei b'shus eitzes. So it's again, he was a tov b'dvar mitzvah. He was esig b'mitzvah, and lepel he ended up doing the mitzvah. And therefore, even though he did the mitzvah later and he did the avera earlier, nevertheless he goes into the category of a tov b'dvar mitzvah, v'asa mitzvah, and he's potter v'machatos. V'chein. Hashoichet is a Pesach b'yemar ba'asar shecholi is b'Shabbos, and v'noidel le'acher kein shemoshchu abayim es yideyim a shemesu a nitmu kedem shchita. You know, he thought this was a carbon Pesach, that you're supposed to be makrish of a carbon Pesach on Erev Shabbos if it's chal b'Shabbos, but it's only a carbon Pesach that has bailim on it, and that the bailim are allowed to eat. Masha'inkin if moshchu abayim es yideyim, or they died already, the bailim, or nitmu kedem shchita, a shenimtza treifa baseser, or bepel there's somewhere in the hidden part of the behemoth there's a treifa, kigei nikov miyayim ureya, something on the internal organs, so that the miyayim, the intestines have a hole in it, or the reya, or the lung. So the din is areza potter again, mepnei sheshachad b'rshus. And again over here, again we have the same story, the situation where he didn't really do a mitzvah. He wanted to do a mitzvah, and he was shachad. And he was shachad b'rshus, but on the other hand, he was le'os mitzvah. So nevertheless, he's potter. So again, so the beer is because it's an onus. That's an onus. Avol nimtza balmum oishahoisa treifa gluya. It was a balmum oishahoisa treifa gluya, something which he could have been beidik. Is a reza chayiv chatas mipnei shahoil livdik v'achar kach yishchet v'chein kol kietz b'zeh. So he's not an onus. So again, the Rambam is putting together these same dinim. You have to understand the Havanas Advarim. There's one din that a tov b'dvar mitzvah v'asa mitzvah, he's potter v'nachatos. And that was the case where the Rambam brought Habal al Nida, when she was a Yivam, I'm sorry, he was Baal Yevimte when she was a Nida. That was one case. Then there was another case when there was Shnei Tinekis, Lomul, and Lepel. He was Mal both of them. So again, he was a tov b'dvar mitzvah, he was Eisik in a mitzvah, and Lepel he ended up doing a mitzvah. And then there's the case of the Uman, which is Baal Lomul. And over there, if he lepeil ends up not being mal the child on Shabbos, he was only chayvel but not mal. So if they weren't hisrubei, he's also potter. And over there, lechur, it's not mamish the din of tov b'dvar mitzvah. Over there, it's a new din which is called an onus. An onus, masha'inkin, if he wasn't an onus because hisrubei, so then he's takachayv. And then there's another din v'ametzis halula, which is again a din of a tov b'dvar mitzvah. Notice he was involved in doing a mitzvah. And here the chiddush is that even though the mitzvah is not b'shas while he's being gave on the chi of kares, but nevertheless, that's also chayiv. That's also potter. And then there's another din of a sheikhet is a Pesach, and he finds out later that lepel this Pesach is not really a Pesach. Either Moshe Abaylim Yedeim, Mesu Abaylim, Nitmu Abaylim, or lepel is a treifa b'makim she'ein nira. So again, the din is that he's potter, and again because so the lashon Aram is mnei sheshachad b'rshus, which is basically the same lashon that the Ram said before. But over here, this shachad b'rshus is not just a regular din of tov b'dvar mitzvah. It's a tov b'dvar mitzvah, and he has a din of an onus. Halacha Yud Aleph. Shachat is a Pesach b'Shabbos shalei l'shmei b'tos. Because he shechted a Pesach, and he thought that it was a shlom. Lepela was a Pesach, and he thought it was a shlom, and he shechted it shalei l'shmo, but it was a tos because he didn't want to really take away from the Shem Pesach. He just didn't realize it was a Pesach. So the din is potter on the shchita. Why? B'pnei shezevach kosher. Zevach kosher lepel is a kosher Pesach. Whereas a toh, we learned before, a toh is a shalei l'shma b'tois is not a din of shalei l'shma. I'm going to get a carbon Pesach. If he really had in mind to make it a carbon Pesach, he made it as a shlomim, but really it was a carbon Pesach, and the only reason why he had in mind for shlomim is because he didn't realize it was the shlomim. So lepel, it has a din of a carbon kosher. Shakira shmei b'tois ein akira k'misha b'yana b'hilchim psula mukdashim, which is l'chura pasha. That knows even though he thought he was doing something wrong, in other words, according to what he thought he was doing, he was actually doing something wrong. But in reality, he wasn't doing anything wrong, because in reality, it was a carbon Pesach. And it wasn't Nekar, the Shem Pesach, because Akira B'tois is Eini Akira. Halacha Yud Beis. Shochat Zvachim Acherim L'Shem Pesach B'tois. So there was Zvachim Acherim, let's say Shlomim, and he shechted it L'Shem Pesach mistake. He thought it was the Pesach, and in reality, it was a Shlomim. So im uruyim heim l'karban Pesach. If lepel this behema, a karban Pesach has to be a zocher, it has to be a ben shones. If this behema that he shechted b'tois l'shem Pesach was roy to be a karban Pesach, So he's taka potem mikarban chatas. He's potem mikarban chatas. Why? Mipnei sheshachat b'rishus. In other words, it's not really such a. In other words, it's a mistake which is understandable because it's the same type of behema. And on the other hand, the behema that he shechted b'toys for a Pesach is a kosher behema. So he ends up doing a mitzvah. So it comes out that it was a toys, it was a tov b'dvar mitzvah. He wanted to shech the korban Pesach, which he's supposed to shech the korban Pesach, and it was a toys which was reasonable because it's a type of behema which could really be a korban Pesach. And lepel, he was also mitzvah. So you have all three in yonim. Nochmal, shachat zvachim acherim l'shem Pesach b'toys is im ruyim heim l'korban Pesach. If these behemoths are ruyim l'korban Pesach, is potem l'korban chatas mipnei sheshachat b'rishus, because he was shachat b'rishus, and also he was asa mitzvah. Im einam ruyim kigen shoyis in the keva eben shtayim chayiv chatas shari einer roy l'korban Pesach. So since it's einer roy l'korban Pesach, so therefore such a toys is not considered a justifiable toys. It's just like the toys we learned before, b'negeya ishtenida, he should have asked her. So over here also, al derech zeh, it was a tov b'dvar mitzvah, it was asa mitzvah, but it's not an acceptable toys. V'chein, im shogag v'shachti b'shabes shalei la'ichlov, e shalei l'mnuyev, e la'areilim, e l'tmeim. So it's not an acceptable toys. This is something which he shouldn't have done. So it was a shegig, it was a tov b'dvar mitzvah, but on the other hand, it was shalei la'ichlov, it's chayav chatas. And over here also, he wasn't the kaima mitzvah. He wasn't the kaima mitzvah. He was shachta shalei la'ichlov as possible. Now, shachta la'ichlov v'shalei la'ichlov, or lemnuyev v'shalei lemnuyev, lemulim ul'areilim, l'tmeim ul'teherim, is pater, sharei ha-pesach kosher, v'chein kol tietzbez, which l'chur is pasha. The din is the Pesach is kosher, so obviously, l'chur he's not chayav v'chatas if he has a right to bring a korban Pesach on Shabbat. So you have to know what the chiddush is. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hashechet b'Shabbos korban tzibur shalei l'shmei is a reza chayav chatas. So we're talking about a korban tzibur which be'etzem is deicha Shabbos. So if he were shechted to l'shmei, it would have been kalacha. Lepel, he went ahead and shechted this korban tzibur shalei l'shma. So lepel, he wasn't yotzeh the korban tzibur that he was supposed to have because it was done shalei l'shma. Is a reza chayav chatas. And lepel, the yakter murim la'erev because the behemoth is kosher. But on the other end, even though the behemoth is kosher, so he was asa mitzvah. But on the other end, he has to bring a chatos because the pashtos, a tov b'dvar mitzvah is a mitzvah that he's supposed to do. So a person is supposed to do this mitzvah, and lepel, while he's doing this mitzvah, he ends up doing a chiyuv chatos. So even the moshel, we're talking about a mitzvah, for example, like bring a lulav. So a lulav is not a mitzvah that there's a chil Shabbos, but he was supposed to bring, he was supposed to take the lulav, and lepel, he went ahead and took the lulav, and the Vaili was Mechal Shabbos, so it was called a tov b'dvar mitzvah. For us, a mitzvah is chayav v'chatas. Now, this person is supposed to go ahead and be makriv this korban tzibur. Lepel, he ended up bringing a korban, but not the mitzvah that he was mechuyev to bring on Shabbos. The mitzvah he was supposed to bring on Shabbos, which justified even chil Shabbos, was being yotzei the korban tzibur. Lepel, he wasn't yotzei the korban tzibur. So therefore, even though Lepel, he ended up doing a mitzvah, so Memela, it's not considered a mitzvah that he was supposed to do. And also, there's another thing that he shouldn't have been toyed. It's not a justification for the Torah. Nochmal, Hashechet b'Shabbos, korban tzibur, which is a korban tzibur which is supposed to be deicha Shabbos. But lepel, he shechted this korban tzibur shalei l'shmei, is a reza chayav chatas, is chayav chatas. That's not called a tov b'dvar mitzvah, for us a mitzvah, and therefore he's part of an chatas. He's chayav chatas. For two reasons. First of all, there was no chiyuv to go shech this behemoth shalei l'shma. This behemoth shalei l'shma is not the mitzvah we're supposed to do. So even though he ended up bringing a korban, but not this korban that he was mechuyev to do on that day. And also, there's no justification for that type of a shegig. And v'yakter emurim la'arev, since lepel, it was shalei l'shma, so Mele goes into the klal of kol asvachim shnizbuchu shalei l'shma k'sheira, and l'shalol l'bayim shem cheva. So Mele, you bring the emurim, but it's not yoytze, the korban that you had to bring. V'chein im shochat yesra cheva sayim. Again, a person is mechuyev to, the tzibur is mechuyev to bring 2 tmidim every day, and he went ahead and brought a third talmud. So this is not a mitzvah. The third talmud that he's bringing is not really, you can't call him a tov b'dvar mitzvah because there's no mitzvah to bring the third talmud. And even though, and so Memele is chayiv chatas al atesus, and there's also no justification for that type of a mistake. So here we're talking about a korban which be'etzem is a chiyuv, you could be deicha Shabbos, but lepel, since he did it shalei l'shma, or he did it yaser mecheves hayem, so therefore he's chayiv chatas. Now, halacha yudal l'shochet, Korbanos Yochid Shein Deichem Is HaShabbos B'Shabbos B'Shgoga. He went ahead and he was shechted as a carbon yochid. A carbon yochid, he has a carbon oila, and his personal carbon oila is not decha Shabbos, and he went ahead and shechted it on Shabbos. Bishgogos, so then it's chayiv chatos. That's chayiv chatos, because even though he was a Tobit var mitzvah, he wanted to shech the carbon chatos, and he was also mitzvah lepel shech the carbon oila, and lepel he brought an oila, because lepel is the oila lebayim shem cheva. Aber lepel is also chatos. If he's zerik the dam it's kosher. But nevertheless, there was no mitzvah for him to bring this carbon on today. That's not called a Torah B'dvar mitzvah. And also, there's no justification for this type of a toys. So it works both ways. A Torah B'dvar mitzvah means there's a mitzvah that's pressing that you have to do, and you're supposed to do it today. But on the other hand, Lepel, doing that mitzvah, you ended up doing also an Issachars. So you were doing something you were supposed to do, but on the other hand, you ended up doing Issachars. Like you were supposed to bring the lulav and esrog. But lepel, you're supposed to do it, and you did it. And lepel, and meanwhile, you also did you were over on Shabbos. But over here, you weren't supposed to bring this carbon in an eifon shalei lishma. This carbon yochid wasn't supposed to be brought on Shabbos. That's not called the Torah B'dvar mitzvah. And v'habas and muter bano. Yeah, nachamol. The shachet karbonis yochid she'ein dechnos haShabbos b'Shabbos b'shgaga is chayiv chatos. But on the other, even though you're chayiv chatos, but lepel you don't have a din. In other words, if a person was over haShabbos b'mezid, the basa would be aser b'hamno. Over here, there's no psul because you were mechal Shabbos. Lepel vein zeiknes adam. Lepel you're not zeiknes adam. And lepel if you're not going to be zeiknes adam, which is really isu b'drabon, and you're not zeiknes adam, so it's going to end up being psul amugdosh, which you're not taking allowed to have hano. No, there's no Isra Ano mitzad the Shchita. But Lepel is Ein Zerknes Adam, that's a Drabon Dikadin, and if you're not going to be Zerknes Adam, it's going to be Osib Ano mitzad Psul HaMekdoshim. However, Vim Over, V'zorik Dom Lishmon, so then B'Shegig, B'Mezid, Lepel is Olu L'Baylim L'Shem Cheva. So this was Olu L'Baylim L'Shem Cheva. This oil you were Makta Lishmon. You were Makta this oil Lishmon, but you shouldn't have been Makta on Shabbos. This Lepel is Olu L'Baylim L'Shem Cheva, V'Yakter Emurim L'Everef. V'habasar yiyachol v'yavi ha'sheichet chatas al Shegagos. So in other words, the carbon that you brought, you were yaitza. You were yaitza with this carbon. You went ahead and was makriv this carbon on Shabbos b'shegig. You thought that you're allowed to be makriv this carbon on Shabbos b'shegig. So you were yaitza the carbon. Lepel, you were yaitza the carbon, and the carbon is mutar b'amno and b'achila if you're zedig the dam. But lepel, you have to bring a chatas for going ahead and shechting this carbon on Shabbos. Halacha Tezvov. Hoyu lefonav shtei behema shel tzibur. Achas chusha v'achas shmeina. And v'hoysa cheves hayem ba'achas. There was only a chiyuv to bring one of them. Bein chatos, bein eila, something which a chatos of the tzibur, which is deicha Shabbos. And v'shagag and lepel v'shachat hashnayim. You shechted both of them. Is im shachat chusha betchila. If the first one you shechted was a thin animal, chusha, not a fatty animal. So the din is pot in the carbon chatas, because shechting the shmeina after you shechted the chusha is not an avera fakert. Not only is it not an iser to shech the shmeina after the chusha, because you're supposed to have mifcher in the derech. You're supposed to have the best. So we made a bidiyavad, even if you shechted the chusha and you brought the chusha, you were yaitza. But since there's a mitzvah to bring the shmeina, so even on Shabbos, you went ahead and this carbon is deicha Shabbos, and you shechted the chusha. We're talking about you just shechted. You didn't. If you were zerik the dam, there's nothing to talk about. After you zerik the dam, you already mekayim the mitzvah, so you can't go ahead and shecht again. But we're talking about you were shechted the chusha. Now you realize that you have a shmeina, so the din is lachatchila on Shabbos. You go ahead and shecht the shmeina. Le'im lehavi shmeina shchet lachatchila. That's if you shechted first the chusha and then the shmeina. So then it's chayiv chatas ala tesus. That's this din. Now nimtza, so that's the din. So the din is if you shechted first the chush and then the shmeina, you're not chayiv chatas because you didn't do anything wrong. Faket, you did something right. Ashenkin, if you shechted the shmeina and then you shechted the chusha, so then you are chayiv chatas. Now what happens if you shechted the shmeina, then you shechted the chusha, and in reality you shouldn't have shechted the chusha, because you already shechted the shmeina. And lepel at the end later is nimtzus harishena hashmeina treif b'nei. Now we realize that you didn't realize it when you shechted the chusha, but now we realize that the shmeina was a treif b'nei. Zafal Pishal Yoda she treifa be'eshu shachat at kusha and v'leila zen is chaven. He thought that you're supposed to shacht. He's shachting another beima lepel. According to his understanding, he taka was over on chiyav chatos. A beheil v'nishchet ha'achreinik mitzvasa. Aliba dam is the first one was puzzled. So Mela, the second one was justifiable in bringing, even though he didn't know the justification. But lepel aliba dam it was justified. So therefore, that is a pastor mechatas. So even though in his mind, we look back at what he did, l'churi he was aver on the isur chatas, isur karas. He shechted something which he shouldn't have shechted. But now we realize that he should have. So memela, so he's not chayav chatas. V'chein the same din. Aperes mitzud al is dogm and ayam b'shgaga, and that's something which is a chiyav chatas. And lepel v'hel a tinik imat dogm, and lepel aliba davis he brought up a tinik. Ben sheshama shetav a tinik, ben shalei shama. And Memela Lechura, he did an avla that he's putting, is coming to fish, to take out fish. Since Lepel, he was helatinik, he did something was justifiable to do, even though his intent was to do something which wasn't justifiable. So the din is a potem mechatas. Afal pi shleihoise kavanosi elolot. So his kavanah was really to do an avera. But Lepel, since he brought the tinik up as well, so therefore it was justified what he did. Since he was a shegig, v'chein kol kiyetz b'zeh. So the Lashon Rambam is mipnei shegig. The implication is that if he would have been amazed, he would have been chayiv. In other words, a case where a person b'shegig took out a net, lotzu dogim, and lepel he ended up being lotzu also a tinnik. So in such a case, he's not chayiv v'chatas. But what happens if b'mezid he went ahead lotzu dogim, and lepel he ended up being also tzoda tinnik, so in such a case he would be nanish. That's what it sounds like from the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchos Shabbos writes clearly that if a person went ahead and eschavan lahalis dogim and lepel he was helig dogim the tinnik, so the din is his potter. So the question is, it's like a stira. Over here the Rambam seems to be saying that this ptur is only by a shegig, by a chatas, and over there the pashtus advarim is that it's a ptur also by a mezid. So the Rambam brings from the Klechem that there's a difference between a mezid, which would be on Onish Ayidei Bezin, as opposed to a mezid, which is an Onish Koris. So say some Onish Alpi Bezin, so Take Lepel, if he was tzad, also a tinnik, he would be potter, even though they would be master him, they're telling him don't be tzad the dogim, and he went ahead and tzad the dogim. L'chur is chayiv skila, but if Lepel, why is being tzad the dogim? With that say that he was also Maila tinnik, so he's potter. Mashenkim and again, the Chiyuv Koris, he's saying that the Chiyuv Koris would take a bichal. If a person intends on doing a Maiset Seder, and he did the Maiset Seder, but while he did the Maiset Seder, he also did a Maiset of the Allah Satinik, so the fact that he was Allah Satinik without Kavanah doesn't take away the Isser that he did with the Tzeder, since he had a Kavanah for the Tzeder. And he says, the Hezber says, by a Shegig, the whole Isser is the Asiyah. In other words, the fact that he will pale Maila the Dogim. So since together with the Maila the Dogim, he was Maila the Tinnik, so therefore there's no Chiyuv Chatas. Mashenkin by a Mezid, the Chiyuv Koris, it's not only the Asiyah, it's the Asiyah together with the Kavanah, where he wanted to do the Yisr, and he did the Yisr. So the Pale over here, he wanted to do the Yisr, and he did the Yisr, he was Maila the Dogim, and the Vaili was also Maila the Tinnik, so he's finding that in such a case, so he would be Chayv Koris, which would be a very big Chiddush. Halacha Tezayin. Mi shahoy lefonu b'leili ha-Pesach tzoli shel Pesach, v'noiser min ha-kochim. And lepel v'nischaven lechel tzoli shu mitzvah, and v'shogan v'ochal ha-neser. So the din is ariza chayiv chatos. So even though he was a tobit var mitzvah, but over here shari liyasa mitzvah b'achilazu v'chein kol kiyetz b'zeh. So we're learning the whole time that in order to be a tobit var mitzvah is only if it was asa mitzvah, unless that tobit var mitzvah, as we said, goes into a gather of an oinus. Like a person goes ahead and shechts Korban Pesach, and later he finds out that the Korban Pesach is a treifa. So that Torah B'dvar Mitzvah, even though it was Le'osim Mitzvah, but nevertheless it goes into the gather of onus. Now we had before Beneged that Tinoikis, so we learn like this: if you had two children to be mal, and one was supposed to be on Shabbos and one was supposed to be on Sunday or on Friday, and Lepel you were mal both of them. So the din is that's a Torah B'dvar Mitzvah, a mitzvah, and Lepel you potter on the one you were mal, which you shouldn't to be mal. Now what happens if you only have one child and he was supposed to be mal on Sunday, and Lepel you were mal on Shabbos? So the din again is your potter. The din is your potter. I'm sorry, the din is your chayiv, because over here you weren't a Torah B'dvar Mitzvah because you really had no right to be malim on Shabbos. You had no right to be malim on Shabbos. That was the two cases that the Rambam said. Now, what happens? We mentioned. What happens if you have two children? You have one child to be mal on Shabbos, and one child Shabbos not to be mal on Shabbos. And Lepel, you went ahead and were mal the one that you were supposed to not be mal on Shabbos. You mal on Shabbos, and not the other one. It's not like you would mal both of them. You only mal. You had a child. You had a child to be mal on Shabbos and on Sunday. You took the Sunday child, and you were mal him on Shabbos, and you weren't mal the Shabbos on the Shabbos child on Shabbos. You pushed him off for Sunday. So there, the Kesef Mishnah says clearly that you're chayiv, because over here you were a Torah b'dvar mitzvah. She didn't have Rabbi Yeshua. You were Torah b'dvar mitzvah and lepel le'asa mitzvah, because there's no mitzvah of being mal the Sunday child on Shabbos, and therefore you're chayiv. Now, what about fakir? You have a Friday child and a Shabbos child. So the Friday child shouldn't be nimal on Shabbos because it's not shlei bizmani. The Shabbos child should be nimal on Shabbos, and you went ahead and you were mal the Friday child on Shabbos, not the Shabbos child. So the question is over here, l'chura also you made a mistake, and you were mal the one that wasn't supposed to be nimal today. But lepel the Friday child on Shabbos, when you were mal him, he would kaim a mitzvah. You taka shouldn't have been kaim this mitzvah because it's not deicha Shabbos the Friday child. But lepel you were a Torah b'dvar mitzvah. You wanted to be mal the Shabbos child, and v'asa mitzvah you would mal the Friday child. So l'chura, based on what we're learning over here in Rambam, l'chura would come out that you're potter, because let's say in halacha yud beis we have shachat zvachim acherim l'shem pesach b'toy. So today is Shabbos. You're supposed to be makriv a korban pesach, and lepel you went ahead and you were makriv zvachim acherim l'shem korban pesach. So you were a Torah b'dvar mitzvah. You wanted to be makriv the pesach, and you were makriv zvachim acherim l'shem pesach. So the din is so the question is im ruim heim l'korban pesach. The Rambam writes. So then you're potter l'korban chatos because it's a reasonable mistake. And be'emes, but lepel, where's the asa mitzvah? Where's the asa mitzvah? The answer is because lepel, the zvachim acherim, which you shechted l'shem pesach b'tois, is eino chinami, it was l'shem pesach, but lepel, it's the mitzvah is a mitzvah. The zevach is a zevach kosher. The zevach is zevach kosher. And nachmer, the zevach is a zevach kosher for what it was, because lepel, a tois is not considered a tois. In other words, a tois is not oiker the shem, so it's considered stom and lishma. So it's considered lishma. So those zvachim acherim which you shechted l'shem pesach, which you had no right to shechter on Shabbos, but lepel you were a Torah b'dvar mitzvah, and you were asa mitzvah because those zvachim were nizbach, and lepel they're kosher, so therefore you're potter because of a Torah b'dvar mitzvah, asa mitzvah you're potter. So l'chura al derech zeh, if you have two children, one child of Friday and one child of Shabbos, so lepel, even if you shechted the Friday child on Shabbos, not the Shabbos child on Shabbos, so nevertheless it was Torah b'dvar mitzvah and v'asa mitzvah because the Friday child on Shabbos is a mitzvah. So l'chura you shouldn't be chayav achatos. So in other words, there would be a difference if you have two children, one is Friday and one is Shabbos, or you have one is Shabbos and one is Sunday. So there would be a difference whether or not you'd be chayav achatos based on what we're learning here.